Welcome back to Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. On the program, we're talking about two of the disturbing trends that we're seeing to kick off 2024. Trend number one, the ever-increasing financial advisory fees. Folks, this time of year, you're getting those 2023 annual statements. Take a minute. I know it's buried on page 47 of 50, but look at those expenses. We just spent some time just this past week with someone who was coming into the office for the very first time, pouring through those statements. Lo and behold, and I'm going to repeat those numbers again, 1.25% on their $2.5 million account. You know what that adds up to? If you do the math, it's $31,250. Let me say that again. That's a cost of $31,250 on a $2.5 million account. Here's the thing. That's only part of the cost, because when you look at the investments or the particular investments, mutual funds, ETFs, whatnot, that this particular account held, well, every single one of those also has additional expenses as well. We're talking just about a piece of the expense, not the piece that you don't see with this respect to the expenses inside the investments, some of which added another 1% of expense into the total mix. I'm going to put this further into perspective because we're going to stay on this story of the individual that came in and visited with us this past week. So this person was retired. They were looking for some supplemental income out of their portfolio. Again, $2.5 million. It's a pretty good sized portfolio. And effectively, they were looking for like income that was less than 2% of their $2.5 million portfolio. So like around like $4,000 a month. So $50,000 a year. That's the equivalent of 2% of $2.5 million. The problem is, again, you go back to the $31,000 of fees, not including the investment expense, but just the financial advisory fee at 1.25%. The fees were over 50% of the income that they were trying to get out of their investment portfolio. Folks, this is a disturbing trend that impacts you, the investor, you, the retiree, and ultimately reduces down how much money you have. That's kind of excessive, don't you think? I mean, these are the things that you need to know, folks. This time of year, you get those annual statements, look through them, and see how much you are paying. Is there a separate expense cost? And then, in terms of the investments that you own, what are the costs associated with those as well? Do the investments themselves as additional? Because the reality is, unless it's an individual stock, if it's a mutual fund, an ETF, or whatever the case may be, yeah, there's other costs inside there. So you have to combine those two together. I'm going to take a moment, and we don't necessarily sort of toot our own horn, if you will, kind of like a lot of other programs do every 5 seconds, or at least I don't think we do. We're going to just take a moment and just do a little comparison, okay, to share sort of the rest of the conversation that we had with this particular gentleman this past week. On an account that size, $2.5 million, our compensation works out to be 0.25%. So stop and think about that right there. The difference between 0.25% versus 1.25%, compensation that would go to us, 0.25%, that's $6,250. I think that's still a pretty good amount of money, right? On a $2.5 million account, chances are, if I can't figure out my economies of scale as a business and have over $6,000 of income on a single individual client, then maybe I probably shouldn't be given advice in the first place. But lo and behold, you've got these giant financial institutions, 8,700 financial advisors at last count, over $1 trillion in assets, and they're charging 1.25%. Does that strike you as making sense? It shouldn't. Maybe because your account's so big, it's $2.5 million, and you're like, doesn't matter. Well, good on you if you think that way. I don't know why you would think that way, because that cost, that money, On this $2.5 million account, 1.25%, the cost is $31,250. Our cost at 0.25% is $6,250. That's a difference of $25,000. Whose pocket do you want that $25,000 in? You want it in mine? Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad we got some fans out there. That's good. But I don't think you really want that. I would think that you would want that $25,000 in this particular example. Now, maybe use that for a nice vacation, right? Maybe, that's almost, I guess, a semester's worth of college, depending upon where you go. Maybe you can get a year out of it for $25,000. Or perhaps that's a very generous donation to your favorite charity or church or whatever the case may be. And I guess that's the question. Don't you want that money going to your own benefit rather than the firm that you're dealing with? And the crazy thing is, you would think in today's world that these advisory costs and things like that would be going down. And that's just not the case. And we see that trend. And that's why we're referring to it as a disturbing trend here in the new year. If you're over 1% on any amount of money, obviously a $2.5 million account, that's a good size account, but for some reason still getting charged 1.25% at this large financial institution. It's your money. These are the kinds of things that ultimately you want to make good sense out of your dollars, right? So you got to really pay attention to what the costs are. That's story number one of the two disturbing trends that we're talking about on the program this week. We're going to shift gears to the other disturbing trend, and this one is it hits home. And it should hit home to pretty much every single listener out there, because it's not a function of if you're going to be approached from a scam artist. It's a function of when. So here's the story on sort of the disturbing second trend that we're talking about on the program today. And that is this increasing amount of online scams. And if you think it can't happen to you, if you think you can't be fooled, look, these are professionals whose job it is to get your money out of your pocket and put it into theirs using whatever means possible. Now, here's the interesting development on this front, and here's really the key thing that I want you to listen to. It used to be that it seemed like these scams sort of really targeted elderly people, right? Folks of a certain age, maybe a little bit more susceptible, maybe not, quite as cognitive as maybe what they were when they were younger. So it seemed like that there was a lot of these scams that really sort of targeted, our most vulnerable population, the elderly. And that's not the case anymore. There's been a significant shift of a lot of these scams and on online scams to really focus on the younger generation. And stop and think about that, if you will, for just a minute, as to kind of again, these are professional criminals behind these scams. So they're not idiots. And they're like, well, wait a minute. If I'm talking to a guy who's a gal who's 75, do they really know how to take a picture and text it to someone? Are they really that savvy that that's easy for them to do? Don't they get kind of frustrated with a QR code? I mean, does a 75-year-old, is he really going to be able to, allow me to perpetuate my scam in a rapid, easy fashion? Or if I'm maybe trying to scam a 25-year-old, well, shoot, those guys know how those phones work pretty good. They can take pictures, they can text it. It's like second nature. And here's the problem. This is why this is one of the more disturbing trends this year. When you're young, you're invincible, you're not really maybe have your guard up as much. And that's when they strike. So when we return, we're going to tell you two different stories at two different educational institutions of higher learning in two different areas of the country that we're going to share with you to really emphasize the need for you to pay attention and warn your kids and grandkids to pay attention as well. Coming up next here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning.